Everybody, it's Wednesday night. We're having Halacha and Tanya. Tonight we're going to start a new dinim that is called Muktzeh. Now, let me give you an introduction to Muktzeh and to these types of dinim. The Torah forbids certain things. Okay, the Torah gave the Chacham the right and the obligation to make fences around the Torah. That was a biblical obligation the Torah gives to the Chacham. So many times, especially when it came to Hilchos Shabbos, the Chacham decreed certain rabbinic decrees, and they were done for many reasons. One is that they shouldn't come to do something biblical. It looks like they were doing something forbidden. It might lead them to do something, or there's a lot of different reasons. Marasayan, when you might look like you're doing something wrong. One of the things the Chachamim instituted for Muktzeh on Shabbos is the concept of Muktzeh. Now, Muktzeh is the general concept of Muktzeh means you're not allowed to move certain things on Shabbos. Okay? Now, there's three reasons, some people say four reasons, why the Chachamim instituted the concept of Muktzeh on Shabbos, that they don't want you moving things in the normal way of moving it like you do it during the week. It has nothing to do with touching. You're allowed to touch something which is Muktzeh, but you can't move Muktzeh. Now, why did the Chachamim say it? The Rambam and the Ravid, and the Alter Rebbe brings it down. One reason why the Chachamim instituted the concept of Muktzeh is because he said as follows: if you're not allowed to walk on Shabbos like you walk during the week, you're not allowed to talk on Shabbos like you talk during the week. So the Chachamim didn't want that people should start moving whatever they want around the house, and therefore they won't have any, there won't be a Shabbos dika thing in their house. That's one reason. Another reason is because you might come to carry. If I'm just moving everything around the house in any way whatsoever without any limitation, I might come to carry it outside. The third reason is because there are people that don't work a whole week. So for them, how do they have Shabbos? Okay, a working person works during the week, Shabbos, they're off from work. But a person that doesn't work, how do they celebrate Shabbos? So the Chachamim came along with the concept of Muktzeh, because at least by not moving things that you normally do during the week, then you'll remember that it's Shabbos. Okay, so there's three general reasons. Number one, because if the Navi says you can't walk on Shabbos during the week, you can't talk on Shabbos during the week, the Chachamim didn't want you to move things on like during the week because they want you to rest on Shabbos. Second reason is it might come to carrying on Shabbos. Third reason is because people that don't work a whole week, how is Shabbos different? So Shabbos is going to be different by not moving certain objects. There is another reason of Muktzeh also, that if you just allow a person to move whatever they want, they might come to do something forbidden. Okay? Now, historically, it's as follows. In the days of the beginning of the second Bais Din, when Ezra and Nehemiah, were the two leaders of Jewish people, went up to build the second Bais Din, the Gemara says Nehemiah saw the people were extremely, extremely lax when it came to the laws of Shabbos, super lax. So he made emergency decrees to get people back on track. You know, if something's bent all the way to the left, you want to get it back to the right. You have to do fanatical things a little bit. So what did he do? He said, you are not allowed to move anything on Shabbos except plates and cutlery for food. That's it. You're not allowed to move anything on Shabbos, he said. That strictness got people back into the Shabbos mode. As time went on, and people were becoming more religious in the laws of Shabbos, so what he did, he relaxed certain halachos, certain kelim you could touch and move. Then as people became more observant, he lessened it and he said you can move more types of utensils. Okay? So that's the origin and the history of Muktzeh. But nowadays, the decrees that the Gemara says still remain, and Shulchan Aruch says still remain for the duration of Shabbos by the Jews. Okay? So again, Muktzeh, and this is a misinterpretation. People think, oh, you're not allowed to turn on a light on Shabbos, it's Muktzeh. Muktzeh, by the way, the word Muktzeh, what does the word Muktzeh mean? The word Muktzeh means separated, it's removed from a person's mind, it's not designated. This is what people, the concept of Muktzeh means, it is not designated. It's not set for usage on Shabbos. There is a number of categories of Muktzeh. We're going to go through them one by one. Some categories of Muktzeh can never be moved for anything, unless it's a danger. Other things of types of Muktzeh, you're allowed to move under certain conditions. Okay? And it's going to take time to go through the laws of Muktzeh, but they're extremely, extremely practical, because every Shabbos we need to know, what am I allowed to move? What am I not allowed to move? So number one, there's something called Keli, a vessel, Shemelachto leheter. Something which is designated purpose is for something permissible. For instance, watches that you're allowed to wear, games that you're allowed to play, things that you're allowed to do on Shabbos, those things are called utensils for permissible usage. If it's for a permissible usage, they're not muktsa on Shabbos. Our Rebbe brings down, and Shulchan Aruch brings down, that for absolutely no reason, you shouldn't move it. So the commentator says, how could that be? I mean, you're moving it, it's for a reason. I want to start talking today, which is probably one of the most practical parts of Muktzeh, is what's called Keli Shemelachto le'isser. Keli Shemelachto le'isser means a vessel whose primary use is something forbidden on Shabbos. It's a keli, it's a vessel, it's a utensil, but Shemelachto le'isser is primarily used for something forbidden. For instance, a pen is made to write. The purpose of a pen is to write. Writing is forbidden on Shabbos. A hammer is primarily used for construction, for knocking nails. Knocking in nails construction is one of the forbidden biblical malachos on Shabbos. Therefore, I'm just giving these two examples now. A hammer, a pen, those are what's called Keli Shemelachto le'isser, which means its primary use is for something forbidden on Shabbos. Now, what is that category of Muktzeh? What is the law about these types of things? And we'll go through examples, many, many different examples. The din is like this. Such a thing, such a Muktzeh thing, if I need the place that it's on, or I want to use it for something permissible on Shabbos. Those two categories. If I need the place that it's on, or I want to use something permissible with it, to do something permissible with this vessel whose primary use is forbidden, then I'm allowed to move it. But what happens, I'm just telling the gathering, we're going to talk about it and you'll understand that it's not that complicated. What happens though, if the pen is outside and I don't want it to get stolen? I am not allowed to bring it into the house. For instance, if the pen is on the dining room table and I have to set the table for Shabbos, and somebody forgot the pen on the table, I'm allowed to pick up the pen on Shabbos and put it down wherever. If I have a hammer is, like we said, Keli, Shemelachto, okay? But I want to crack open a coconut. Now I'm allowed to open a coconut on Shabbos. So even though a hammer is primarily used for something forbidden, for construction, which is forbidden, but I'm allowed to use a hammer on Shabbos for something permissible. I want to crack open a nut. I want to crack open a coconut. Then I'm allowed to use the hammer on Shabbos. It's not muktsa. But if the hammer's outside and I'm afraid it's going to get ruined in the rain or somebody's going to steal it, I'm not allowed to move it. It's mukteh. Okay? That is, now we're going to learn many, many cases of examples that will understand exactly what this din is. And it's a very common mukteh because a lot of things in the house are Keli Shemelachto le'isa, things that are primarily used for forbidden things. Now, let's discuss a little bit. Okay, so if I need the place where it is, okay? So he said somebody left scissors on the table, a hammer on the table, a pen on the table. I'm allowed to pick it up and I'm allowed to move it. So now let's give examples of these dinim and we'll see how practical these dinim are. A pot, no, if you're moving it, somebody asked the question, would I need to move the pen with a shinui, meaning differently than normal? If I'm moving it because I need the place, I can pick it up normally and put it down normally. I don't have to do it with the shinui. I don't have to do it with the change. Because generally speaking, when the Chachamim forbade moving objects on Shabbos because of Muktzeh, they forbade moving it the normal way of moving it. But you could kick Muktzeh if it's not the normal way of kicking it. But not all Muktzahs can you kick. And we'll get into those dinim later. But now we have to go systematically, and then we'll understand all these dinim better. I'll give you an example. I'm going budget with the order of the book over here on Muktzeh. Cooking pots. Okay, an empty pot that you cook soup in. What's the primary purpose of that pot? It's to cook. You're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. So an empty pot or baking pans or cooking utensils, which are primarily used for cooking, which is forbidden on Shabbos, is a Keli Shemelachto le'isa. Why am I allowed to move my pot of soup that has soup in it? Because the vessel is inferior to the food. It's bottled to the food, and the food is not muktsa. For edible food is not muktsa. So therefore, if I have a pot of soup, okay, as long as there's soup or food in the pot, it's not muktsa. But what happens if somebody left a big empty soup pot on the counter before Shabbos? Now Shabbos began, and the empty pot of cooking pot was left out. The din is, if I don't need the place on the counter, I'm not allowed to move that pot. If I need the place, I can move the pot. Or if I want to use the pot for something permissible, I want to put food into it, then I'm allowed to. But the pot, because it's a pot that you cook in or bake in, or any of these baking equipment, I can't move it for no reason at all. If the pot is left on the table, and I don't need that pot, it's on the other end of the table, and there's two of us eating, and we don't need that spot on the table, I'm not allowed to move the pot. Now, what happens if I decide I want to eat on that side of the table? I could cheat a little bit. I want to eat on that side of the table, and now I need the space where the pot is on. So then I would be allowed to move it. But people sometimes, they leave a pot out, and the Shabbat, okay, why a pot? Why can't I put it away? You're not allowed to put it away. Unless if you need it, you need the space to use the space, or you want to use the pot for something permissible. I'll give you another example. A ruler. Yeah, you have a regular ruler. There. Here's a ruler. Okay. What is the purpose of a ruler? The purpose of a ruler is to measure. Measuring is forbidden on Shabbos. You're not allowed to measure on Shabbos. Now, if I can't measure on Shabbos, a ruler is what's called Keli, Shemelachto, Li'isr. The primary use of this ruler is for something forbidden. So therefore, if somebody left a ruler and outside and I just don't need it, I'm not allowed to move it. If I want to use it banging like this, or I want to use it as a marker, or I want to use it to reach something, whatever, then I would be allowed to move it, because then I'm moving for something permissible. Or if I need the place where the ruler is on, then I can move it. Sewing needles, okay, knitting needles, all that type of stuff. Sewing is forbidden on Shabbos. So therefore, what's a needle? Its primary use is something forbidden. But what happens if I need it on Shabbos to take out a splinter where it not necessarily will bleed? I need it to poke something, or I need to take out a splinter. Now, if the splinter is for sure going to bleed, then I can't cut open the skin because I'm causing bleeding at Shabbos, which is forbidden. But if it might cause bleeding, might not cause bleeding. So then, halachically, I can take a needle and use it to take out a splinter if it's not that deep. Otherwise, a needle is made primarily used for something which is forbidden to do on Shabbos. Another example, measuring cups. Many times you have the glass measuring cups. The primary use of that cup is to measure. Therefore, it's Keli Shemelachto Li'isr. What happens though if I just want to? I'm not measuring. I want to pour in water into the cup to drink, or I want to pour water in. It's a bigger thing. I want to pour water to serve a little bit of water. Then I'm using it for something permissible because I'm not measuring. Then you'd be allowed to move it. If it's left out and on the counter and I need the space, I would be allowed to move it. If I don't need the space, I wouldn't be allowed to move it. You cannot put it away just to get it out of the way. If you need the place, but halacha says you could cheat with this, by the way. It's called yadin, meaning what happens if I left the hammer outside and I don't want it to get lost. So I could decide I want to eat a coconut, or I decide I want to eat a nut, even though I wouldn't have eaten the nut if the hammer wasn't outside. You know, even though Dr. Rebbe says you shouldn't eat nuts that are in the peel on Shabbos, in the shell, I mean. But hypothetically, what happens is I need the hammer to crack open a nut. I'm allowed to bring in the hammer because I need it now to crack open a nut. Understand? So you could cheat a little bit, but to move something because I don't I need to put it away, that you're not allowed to do with any of these Keli Shemelachto le'isur. I'll give you another example, which is what? You asking something?
What about washing dishes? Can
We're
I
not
put
talking about washing dishes now. Now we're learning about Muktzeh.
Okay, but it's a pot. It's also like a pot. I washed a pot. I can't put...
We're not talking about washing dishes now. We can't. We're not now. Okay, now candlesticks. It's called leichter. Candlesticks. Candlesticks are primarily used to light candles. That's the primary use of a candlestick, which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Therefore, a candlestick, and I'm making myself very clear, not the candlestick you lit that Shabbos. A plain candlestick that I didn't use on that Shabbos. That candlestick, candle holder, whatever, is a Keli Shemelachto le'isur. It's something whose primary usage is something forbidden. Therefore, if it's on the dining room table and I need to set the table and I need that space, I'm allowed to pick it up and move it. If you need it, I don't know if you do this, but technically, you want to reach something higher than when you could reach, and you want to use the candlestick to knock something down, you'd also be allowed. The candlestick that you lit that Shabbos is completely muktsa. It cannot be moved for any reason whatsoever. The candlestick and we'll learn those dinim later. I'm not bringing out that din now. The candlestick that you lit that Shabbos, even when the candles are extinguished already, even when there's no more candles, they burn down, you're not allowed to move that candlestick at all on Shabbos for any reason. If it's a candlestick that you didn't use that Shabbos, so then it's what's called Keli Shemelachto le'isur. Then if you need the place, you can move it. If you want to use it for something else, whatever, then you'd be allowed to do it. Okay, the same thing, I'll give you an example. Scale, a scale. Electric scale for sure, digital scale for sure, you can't use on Shabbos. But what happens, you know, when we were discussing the halachos Pesach, you know, you have to eat a certain amount of matzah, and you want to see if the matzah is that amount. So you weigh it on a little scale. Okay, that scale is Keli Shemelachto le'isur. So therefore, you can't move on a Shabbos unless you need the place, or you want to do something permissible with it. But what happens? I want to measure a mitzvah. For instance, I want to know if the challah is enough to bench. Measuring for a mitzvah is allowed. If I want to weigh on Pesach, even on Shabbos Pesach, I want to weigh the matzah to see if it's the right amount. Measuring for a mitzvah is permitted on Shabbos. So therefore, normally the measuring scale is a Keli Shemelachto le'isur. I wouldn't be allowed to move it unless if I need the place or I want to do something permissible with it. So if I want to weigh myself on it, obviously you can't. But you want to weigh a mitzvah, meaning you want to weigh the matzah to see if it's enough, then you'd be allowed to use the scale on Shabbos. That's the concept of Keli Shemelachto le'isur. Now, measuring again could be done only for a mitzvah. Now, what's with all these little appliances. I mean, I'm using the ones, calculators, flashlights, radios, all those things are forbidden to use on Shabbos. So they are all Keli Shemelachto le'isur. Okay? They're forbidden things that you're not allowed to move on Shabbos. But if I need the place, or I want to do something permissible with it, hold up a book or whatever, then I would be allowed to move it. But I do want to caution one thing before we go further, before we go to Tanya, basically, and that is there are certain things that are worse than Keli Shemelachto le'isur. For instance, if you have a very expensive iPhone, you have a very, very expensive iPhone. Now, normally iPhone would be called Keli Shemelachto le'isur. But an iPhone that's expensive is worse. Because something that you wouldn't use except for what it's designated to use, and that usage is forbidden on Shabbos, that object becomes totally muktsa. To give you a simple example, two simple examples. A shaychet's knife is very delicate. Nobody is going to use it for anything else but shchita. Nobody's going to cut some cheese with that knife or cut a piece of cake with that knife because you ruined the knife. A shaychet's knife, not only is it Keli Shemelachto le'isur because you're not allowed to shecht on Shabbos, it's worse because this is such an expensive, a hammer, you won't hesitate to crack open a nut. Nobody's going to take a $1,000 cell phone and crack open a nut with it. Or take a shaychet's knife or a moil's knife and cut a piece of cake with it. So that is an additional level of muktsa, which we'll Mitzvah Shem get to. Okay, but to wrap up so far, we're not done with Keli Shemelachto le'isur, by the way. Keli Shemelachto le'isur means something whose primary use is forbidden to do on Shabbos. It is muktsa in the sense you cannot move it for the object itself. If I need the place or I want to use something permissible for it, then I'd be allowed to move it. Okay? Now we're going to Tanya.